Hey, everybody, welcome to the show. Thank you all so much for being here. Let me just get this chat up. So, for tonight, I have a very, very special guest. This gentleman is Pete Partle. He is the host and of a channel called Sea of Tranquility, which I've been hooked on for about the last year or so. He does some really fantastic content. He does a lot of album reviews, deep dives. He does interviews with some really, really cool guests. So without further ado, here's Pete. How are you, man?
What's going on? How you doing?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Let me just bring up the chat here. All right. Let me just, we got a bunch of people in here. So let me just say we got 37. It's just awesome. Let me say hello to a few people. Half Face, first one in. Welcome. Tom is here. Cushman, New York City. That's a new name to the channel. Hey, if you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe. There's my buddy Brian S. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Bent Tom. Lefty Mike is with us. Rick Hefner. Six String Brian. Merrill J. Fruitcake Tony. Justin Gunky. There's a new name to the channel. Welcome. Again, if you like what you see, please like and subscribe. Big G's here. Gary, how are you? BV Ninja. Hey, man. Oh, appreciate you popping in, BV. Thank you so much. Merrill J. I'm just going down here. Terry Himes, Hank Hill. Welcome, everybody. Jesse Adams, pardon me. Thank you. Welcome to the channel. Rick Hefner is here. Hank Hill. Lars Guitars. Ricky Compton. Original Paramutant. Mitch Heyman. Russ Marquardt. Hunt 36 Solo. Dave's Guitar Channel is with us. Jeff Young. All right. Welcome, everybody. Metal Madness, another new name. Welcome all to the channel, man. Thank you all for being here. Let me just run the banner here. There we go. All right, now we're professional. Okay. Okay, so Pete, I love your channel, by the way, as I mentioned to you before.
Thank you. Yep, I appreciate it.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Especially for the music nerds and geeks, man. It's like it's all there. It's absolutely all there, man. So I was asking you off air, so I wonder if you want to tell the story. So the whole Sea of Tranquility thing, that's kind of what throws me. So how does that Sea of Tranquility, how does that relate to what you're doing on your channel?
I mean,
how'd you get that name?
That's the $1,000,000 question. So let's go a little history. And I see my buddy Jeff Young, formerly of Megadeth, in the chat. What's going on, Jeff? How are you? For all you guitar geeks out there, I'm sure you know who Jeff is. Yeah, so Sea of Tranquility was actually a print magazine back in the late 90s. And I didn't come up with the name. Our former editor and founder, who passed away a couple of years ago, he had actually created Sea of Tranquility, like I said, as more like a progressive metal magazine. That's really what we were originally as, or founded as, and basically interviewed musicians and bands and reviewed CDs and things like that. It was a full color magazine, and we published about 4 times a year. So I was actually brought on to be a staff writer, I think in 1998. And previously I was writing progressive rock and metal reviews for a website called Prognet. That's kind of how I got my whole start in this whole journalism thing, like all those million years ago. Right. And we eventually moved away from doing the print publication. The print publication was actually purchased by Progression Magazine, and it was like folded into Progression Magazine. So we no longer could operate as a magazine. However, right, we were allowed to take the name and bring it to the web as a webzine. So I stayed on board with James, our former publisher, and in 2001, he and his wife had a baby, and he started a new job, and he came to me one day and he said, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I just don't have the time or the energy, and you seem so into it. You're so good at what you do. You know so much about the music. Would you be interested in taking over as publisher of the webzine and running it? And I was like, sure. So at the time, you know, I kept a couple of the writers, a couple decided to move on, and you know, within a couple of short years, I mean, I had like 25 writers from all around the world who were writing for me. And we started to build up this kind of, you know, database of review content on the website. And it started to really take off. And we really started to have a, you know, like a loyal following. And like the record labels knew who we were. They trusted us to review all their artists, you know, new releases. The bands would come to us to not only get their music reviewed, but to, do interviews and all that stuff. We did concert reviews. We would be in New York City all the time, reviewing shows, taking pictures in the photo pit. We were part of that whole scene all around the world. And it was really, really cool. And,
that's cool, man.
Hundreds of millions of, hits on the website over the years. And it's been almost 20 years and stuff. But, about maybe 7 years ago, started to notice that video was becoming the kind of medium of choice. Everybody wanted to watch videos. And I started to see a lot of the other websites taking things to YouTube and doing, basically reviewing and talking about music on YouTube. So my initial idea was like, let me start up a YouTube channel just as a compliment to the website, never meant to be anything more, and just basically go on YouTube and say, all right, here's the new CD from Kansas. Here's what you can expect. Read our full review on the website. Sayonara, right? That's what we did for the first year. And nobody was watching. I mean, it was frustrating the hell out of me because I was like, all right, nobody's watching this. What do I got to do to get people to watch? So it took 4 years to start to build up a viewership. But it wasn't until I started to I said to myself, you know what, I got to do something different because people just aren't as interested in watching me sit and drone on and on about new albums that came out, right? I have to do something different. Right. So I started doing rants. I started doing album catalog rankings and top 10 song shows and bringing on guests and interviewing them and all that kind of stuff. And boom, before you know it, here we are. 42,000 subscribers and, almost 10 million views and 1,200 videos on the channel. It's really taken on a life of its own to the point where, and we were talking before the broadcast here today, it's I'm probably putting in 30 hours a week or close to it, just doing YouTube stuff. And that's in addition to a full-time job and still keeping the website going, right? So, and a second channel, which is Comic Book Geezers here on YouTube. So that's, I'm also a big comic book guy. So one of my buddies and I co-hosted that show. So it's, it's amazing to, that people love this. And I think that it really speaks a lot to the fact that there are a lot of people out there who just love chatting about music, bands they love, albums they love. That's what it's all about. And I'm a fan. I mean, I never started this to become a celebrity. I started this because I love the music. I'm as big a fan as anybody else, maybe more so. And I'm a total music geek. I love to know who produced the album, who played guitar on it, who played drums on it, what year did it come out, listening to the whole catalogs and, discussing them and the inside and outs of all of them. I mean, I love that stuff. And there's a lot of people out there just like me. And that's, I think, why it's really taken off. And I treat the show, whether it's just me doing a show or when I have guests on, it's like hanging out at a bar or at out in the park or at a barbecue with your buddy or your buddies talking about bands and talking about albums and talking about music. That's what it's all about. It's very friendly, conversational, and I think our viewers love the fact that it's a big community. I mean, probably like you have. You got your regulars that come on all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Tons of them who I see all the time, and I interact with them, and they're just really cool people. They love what I do. I love having them comment and adding their expertise too. And I've got a great cast of co-hosts that have been kind of like regulars on the show that people really like. And and it's been really cool. It's a great experience, and I've just loved it. That being said, it's there's just so much content to cover. There's so much I've done. There's never a dull moment. Never.
Yeah. Well, what I really enjoy is the things you've been doing recently with these deep dives, because there's really, honestly, there's not a lot of new stuff that really, I'm into. But when I hear, here's a deep dive on, the other day you did Heart, right? You did a deep dive. Here's some deep cuts from Heart that, records that came out. I know Heart in the 70s and early 80s, and then when they, the hair got big, I was out, right? But then you were talking about all these records they made in the 90s, and then you're, check out this tune, check out that, and so it's like, it's like you keep going back and mining the music and the bands that you grew up with, and look for these gems, and they're there. Yeah, they're there. That's really cool, right?
Well, you're mentioning, you'd be surprised how many people don't know anything beyond the stuff that was force fed them on the radio and MTV. There's so many people like that. And that's why, as many people who know a lot about these bands and they're very knowledgeable about the catalogs and all the songs, there's just as many, if not more, who are like, well, you know what? I know Barracuda, I know Crazy on You, I know one or two other songs, talking about Heart specifically. And then hopefully, and that's the goal of the shows like that, the Deep Cut Dive show, is that you then offer them 5, or if I ever guessed another 5, 10 songs that they probably have never heard before. It's like, well, I like the popular Heart songs. Let me go check out these deep cut recommendations. And then all of a sudden, their musical world has just expanded exponentially on that band, right? And that's why we do it.
Well, and that's exactly what you just described is exactly what I did. I listened to what you guys were saying, and then I went back into YouTube and I found those songs, and I'm like, oh man, that's a great. I started finding, like, again, these hidden gems, and then it's expanding. What I mean, the hard material that I knew, and made it that much more, right?
Yep,
so that's really cool. And I understand and another one of my favorite. Well, you did the Kiss one, which we talked about. Right, which if you ever do one again, you got to ask me to come on.
You got
it. But you were mentioning that you're going to do one in Rush, and that would be another band where, like, everybody knows maybe up to Moving Pictures, maybe Signals. I mean, like, for myself, I went up to Moving Pictures, I went up to Signals, and then when they got into the heavy keyboard, I was out. And it only came back in the last Clockwork Angels and the more recent records, right? And there's that whole space of Rush that probably most people really, like myself, that cashed out at that point, aren't aware of.
And how about all of the Rush fans who kind of came on board with Moving Pictures and Signals and love that 80s and 90s stuff, and the early stuff, they're like, I don't really know that too well, because there's a lot of those too, surprisingly enough.
Well, that you just brought up an interesting point. It's so generational, isn't it? Right? Like, I think you're probably roughly my age, right? So that stuff that you grew up in your teens and whatever, that's the stuff that you like. That's part of your being, right? But then everybody hits a certain age where they kind of stop listening. Do you know what I mean? And then they just kind of keep going back to the music that they grew up with, right? So, like the 90s Heart, I wasn't really listening to. I wasn't really listening to the later 80s and 90s Rush. That's kind of when, I sort of backed out, right? It's but like you say, like the people that are, say, 10 years younger than us, that's when they came on board,
Sure.
That's like, I find that, I mean, getting, talking about Kiss for a minute, right? Like, I came into Kiss when, I mean, Rock and Roll Over had just come out, so that's my era. But then you talk to other fans that are younger fans, and they're like, oh, my first Kiss record was Crazy Nights.
And it's so funny you bring that up, because I did, I don't know, a couple months ago, I did a ranking the Kiss album show. So I took all of the albums from the very
I saw that one too.
And, I mean, I started listening to Kiss when Destroyer came out. That's when the first album I ever heard was Alive. And then literally I was like, this is great. And then at the same time as when Destroyer came out. So I got both of those right off the bat. So, for me, my favorite Kiss stuff is those first, up till Dynasty. Everything up to Dynasty is what I was really into. And then I started to move into other things. So when I did this ranking the Kiss album show, obviously the top of my list are most of those albums, right? So
the 70s records,
yeah, the 70s records. And I like Creatures in the Night quite a bit, and Lick It Up is fun. But man, a lot of those later albums, I'm not really that into. They're okay. But they're, and there were people who are a lot younger than me who that's what they grew up on. So they're like, oh, that Pardo guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Crazy Nights and Carnival of Souls and all this stuff. Those are the best albums they ever did. And I'm like, that's okay. You think that, but again, you grew up on that. That's great. I didn't.
Yeah.
I grew up on the other stuff. So
that's just the way it is. When in your formative years, that's the music that you treasure. Everything else is, oh, that's cool. But this is the stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hey, Trucker Kev is in here. Trucker Kev, what's going on? He's one of my guys over there.
Oh, cool. Wow, we got 82 people watching. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the channel. If you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe. Much appreciated. And if you have any questions for Pete and for my folks that aren't familiar with Pete and his channel, I have a link in the description. So I would highly recommend you check out Pete's channel. It's really entertaining. Yeah, and if you have questions, please. Oh, Captain Beyond, Rock and Roll Over, my favorite Kiss album. That is my favorite Kiss album.
What's up, Captain? How are you?
That would have been my number one. What was your number one? Do you remember?
My number one album was Hotter Than Hell.
Yeah. That album is great. Yeah.
When I was younger, it was not. That has become my favorite album in more recent years. I absolutely love Hotter Than Hell.
Yeah, Hotter Than Hell is great. The sad part about Hotter Than Hell is the friggin' production.
Yeah, well, the production on those first three albums is not great, to be honest. Yeah, the songs are great.
Oh, the songs are great. We can talk. I don't want to make this an entire Kiss show because I can do that very easily. And I get shit for that all the time. But I'll say one last thing about Kiss. They suffered from bad production, I would say, for the most part of their career, at least in the 70s. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if, when they recorded the Rock and Roll Over record, they recorded it in a theater in upstate New York, right? Because Paul's like, I want this to sound big. I want to sound big like Led Zeppelin. Now, they're not Led Zeppelin, and I'm not trying to compare them to Led Zeppelin, so let's not get excited. But I want that big sound, and that's why they did that. And they got Eddie Kramer, which was the Zeppelin guy, and it sounds okay, but it never hit at that level, And that's but the songs are great, The songs are great, yeah. So and also you were mentioning you're starting to see. I don't know. Is this new for you now, having guests on your show? Is that a pretty recent thing? Because I've only noticed.
Yeah, I've had them periodically, but I would say it's been more of a regular thing the last couple of months. Again, we before we went on the air, we were talking about how when you're doing these YouTube things, you have to periodically kind of reinvent yourself a little bit because
right.
you're riding the hi-hat, right? In other words, so where one show format or topic might be really popular for a while, but people's attention spans are tough to kind of keep track of. So every now and then, every 6 months or so, I kind of have to take stock and say, all right, so what show types are working, which ones aren't, and what could I do new to kind of reinvigorate the audience. So I did an interview with Frank Marino, the guitar legend. God, when was that? Earlier in the year, I think it was. Maybe late last year. I don't remember when it was. It was a while ago.
Yeah.
And that was the first big one that I had done, really big one, notable. And that went over very, very well. And I said, you know what? I want to get more people like that on the show because I love talking to them. They're my heroes, right?
Oh, so yeah, Mahogany Rush.
Yeah, so so I started to reach out to more of them, and some, there's some that I know, some that I don't. But I got Steve Morse on the show. Guitar
that was awesome.
Purple. Awesome. Steve Hackett, formerly of Genesis, on the show. I've got a big one coming up this coming week. I've had the former lead singer from Gentle Giant on the show. All sorts of really, really cool people, and it's now bringing another facet to what I do. So yeah, I'm looking to do more of that. Absolutely.
That's cool. So let's talk music. So, you got, I don't know how many friggin' CDs behind you. I'm assuming you've heard them all.
Oh yeah.
Just the amount of man hours.
A lot more besides what you see here. So.
Oh Jesus! How many man hours of listening? You must get up and just throw it on and just.
Well, 24 hours. I've been kind of amassing this stuff for 30
Yeah,
years.
I know. Yeah,
so, I have way more stuff to listen to than I have hours in the day. That's no joke.
But let me ask you this: so is there still a lot of product? Because you're hearing everything that's coming out. I'm assuming is there still as much product coming out now as there was, say, 10 years ago? Oh,
Way,
there is, eh?
way more.
Way more. Wow.
It's mind-boggling how much stuff. If you were to look at my inbox, my email inbox right now of requests for to review new product by new or old bands or whatever, it's out of control. I don't have the manpower to do it. It's just most of them just get ignored because I got like 5 writers now, and I don't have the time to. I used to be able to easily review about 400 new releases a year. Last year, due to the popularity of this channel and all the time I spend on the YouTube channel, I maybe did 100. That's low for me. So yeah, and that's just me. So if you figure that, there's so much new music, it's out of control. And I'm just talking about the genres that we cover, which is like all the different kinds of metal and hard rock and progressive rock and all that kind of stuff.
So getting back to what I was talking about earlier with the generations and stuff, are like the new metal that's coming out, like are you able to get into that stuff? Like do you like all of it, or like some of it is okay and some of it
Well,
like how heavy is too heavy for you?
Oh, I listen to a lot of heavy stuff. So like I enjoy quite a bit of death metal and black metal.
Okay.
But again, there's too much of it. So like I got really into extreme metal probably about like 8-9 years ago, like really into it. And where I was listening to tons of that stuff, but it got to the point where it was just like complete overload. So I was getting, sent stuff from like hundreds of bands that all sounded like Cannibal Corpse, or that all sounded like Dimmu Borgir or whatever. And it's just like, after a while, it's like, man, all this stuff sounds exactly the same. There's just too many of it. So now, my listening habits to that type of stuff has lessened quite a bit. But I'll still go out and listen to, the Death and Morbid Angel and Nile and the Immolation and a handful of bands and some black metal bands, but I don't listen to the big masses of them. And it's the same thing with like power metal. There's so many European power metal bands that are all just kind of playing that Dungeon and Dragony, Hoister beer type of thing, that happy-go-lucky stuff with the double bass drum and all that sort of thing. And the same thing with the progressive metal bands. There's too much. So I'll stick to the ones that I really like Dream Theater and Symphony X and Camelot and so on and so forth. But I think what I like more as far as like the newer bands are these kind of like European and Scandinavian like hard rock bands. So like these bands like Swedish and Norwegian bands and German bands who are playing like that 70s style heavy blues rock,
Yes.
There's a ton of great bands like that. And I like that more, to be honest with you, from the newer stuff, and then like here in the US, you got Rival Sons, who are absolutely terrific. But that's kind of what I enjoy more nowadays when it comes to like the younger bands, is the ones who are doing like this kind of like 70s style, Graveyard and Witchcraft and Horizont and Blues Pills. I mean, just to name a couple of them, but there's so many of them.
Cool. Yeah, I know. There's, man, I'm so bad with names, but there's this band, and I believe they're Swedish, but they're not so much 70s blues, but they play like a really great, like the best version of 80s rock. But I the name is gonna, and you probably know 100 bands, and we're not gonna go through them all, and I can't remember the name of the band. Anyways, we have a question. This is from Half Ace. Question for Pete: what's the best new song that was tacked onto a greatest hits compilation? I nominate Thin Lizzy, Dedication, and Tom Petty, Mary Jane.
Dedication's a good one. God, that's what I call putting me on the spot. I'm not a big greatest hits guy, so that's like, this is kind of, I'll think about it. Hopefully I can come up with an answer during the broadcast. Yeah, that's a good one though.
Yeah, James Stewart.
Dedication's a great one.
James Stewart is mentioning Ghost. There's another example of.
Yeah, Ghost is good. Yeah, my problem with Ghost is I like their music. I think Ghost is getting a little too big into the image thing, where it's becoming it's more of a gimmick than anything else. They're great songwriters. They're great players. I think they come up with a lot of catchy stuff. I kind of like their earlier albums a little bit better, but they're still really good. I don't know. Now I kind of see Ghost in there. It's all about the look and what costumes they're wearing. And I think the singer, Tobias, is, he's getting very flamboyant and all that kind of stuff. And I wish they would just get back to music, for me. But I still like them. They're still good.
Yeah. So like the reason I'm asking about like the heavier stuff now is, you know, and the type of stuff you listen to. I can imagine, like, I don't know how, like, I can't listen to more than 2 songs in a row and I just get massive ear fatigue. Do you know what I mean? Because you went, I mean, it's okay.
Well, I mean, I got to be in the mood for it. I can't. It's not everyday stuff, but I like the energy of it, and going to see those type of bands live is an experience, I will say. But I don't listen to them as much of that stuff as I used to, but I still do enjoy it, you know, when the time is right. So
if anybody, folks, if you've got questions, please tag me in the chat and I'll forward this. We got 109 people watching, Pete. So this is really cool. This is really cool.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of familiar faces in the chat.
Yeah, folks, if you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe, hit the like, much appreciated. So I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
So, I mean, you listen to, like you mentioned, all prog rock, power, all these genres. What are your favorites? Because I can't ask you your favorite because that's impossible to answer. But what are your favorite bands to listen to?
Like favorite bands of all time?
Sure. Yeah.
My favorite band of all time, and this should come as no surprise to people who follow me, is Deep Purple. I'm a massive Deep Purple fan. Right up there at number 2 is Black Sabbath.
Okay.
Number 3 is Whitesnake. Number 4 is Uriah Heep. And then you got the Zeppelins and the Kisses and the Yes and Genesis and Rush and Thin Lizzy. And I mean, there's too many to mention, you know, Dream Theater, Symphony X, King Crimson, Jethro Tull. I mean, it's so many.
Right.
So many.
Okay. So you mentioned Black Sabbath. So this is a topic that comes up a lot on my show and my discussions. And I've said this before, and this pisses people off. Black Sabbath. What is your favorite version of Black Sabbath?
Well, I mean, obviously you got to lean towards the classic era, right? I mean, it's
Ozzy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying he's my favorite singer in Black Sabbath, but I think that those, like, you know, for me, Black Sabbath, Paranoid, Master of Reality, Volume 4, Sabotage, and Sabbath Bloody Sabbath are as good as it gets for any band ever.
Right.
Nothing touches that. Now, that being said, you know, Dio is my man. He's like one of my favorite singers of all time. So
there it is.
I love Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules, Dehumanizer. You know, I love that stuff. And, you know, I'm a massive Deep Purple fan. Ian Gillan is my favorite singer of all time. I love the Born Again album. We could sit and talk about Born Again all day long here because I love it. And so, but nothing will ever top those first 6 Black Sabbath albums. To me, that's probably the most perfect album run of any band in history.
Oh, wow, really?
There's no weak anything there. From Black Sabbath to Sabotage, absolute perfection on every one of those albums. I don't think any other band beats that, in my opinion.
See, the controversial thing is that, see, again, getting back to the original, like when you get into bands, that's sort of your thing. I got into Sabbath when Dio was with Sabbath, and I saw the first Sabbath show I saw was the Mob Rules tour.
Me too.
Right? Oh, there you go. So, like, my favorite version of Sabbath is with Dio, and Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules, Dehumanizer. The record they put out with Dio later on was, or did they? I don't know. Did they call themselves Heaven and Hell at that point? I'm not
Heaven
sure.
and Hell, yeah.
Okay, so, but that's my favorite era of Sabbath. Like, Tony Iommi, he was on fire, man. Like, all those riffs, like, oh my, like, and here's the other controversial thing. I prefer Mob Rules over Heaven and Hell. I think that's the better record.
You know, I just had this conversation with Martin Popoff on my show recently.
Yeah, I saw that you had Martin on. Yeah,
right. So yeah, he also agrees with you on that, and you know, they're both great albums. I mean, both of them albums are so good. They sound a little different from each other. You can tell they're like, you know, one came after the other, obviously, but the production on each is a little bit different. I think Mob Rules a little darker, maybe a little heavier. Heaven and Hell a little more polished. But I mean, they're both fantastic, and I love that lineup. Absolutely love that lineup. I think Dio fits so well in that band. It was different though. This was a different Sabbath, and like you. when I got into Sabbath, Ronnie was just coming into the band. So the first Sabbath album I ever got was Paranoid, which changed my life forever. And that was literally about a year before Ronnie officially joined the band and they released that album. So he was probably actually just in the band when I started getting into Paranoid. So just imagine how weird it was for me as like a 13-year-old kid. Their first album is Paranoid with Ozzy, and then all of a sudden, oh, here's your new Black Sabbath album, and Ozzy's gone, and here's Ronnie James Dio, and Heaven and Hell doesn't sound anything like Paranoid. So, but I love them both. I mean, I love both eras, big time. But the real drop dead classics are with the Ozzy era early on.
And speaking of forgotten records that just get lost in the mix with the Sabbath thing, as far as Dio is, Dehumanizer does not get enough love because that was awesome. Also a fantastic album.
Probably their heaviest album ever.
Yeah. Hugh Caldwell has got a comment. He says, "Oh shit, there it is." Pete turned me on to, oh god, I'm gonna butcher this name. Borknagar. Am I saying that right?
Borknagar. Yeah, Borknagar.
Borknagar. There you go. Okay. Totally opposite to my normal taste. There you go.
Great band. So Borknagar is a Norwegian symphonic black metal band that adds a lot of progressive elements to their music, and they use like clean melodic vocals along with the kind of harsh, raspy, screamy vocals, but a lot of really cool heavy guitars, a lot of keyboards, a lot of complex passages, a little bit of folk things here and there. So if you're like on the fence at all about black metal, I would definitely recommend Borknagar. They have a lot of really, really good albums.
The way you described is something that there's another one, folks. Check those guys out. We're gonna be. This is the guy. He knows them all. Okay, Jose Benito Martinez has a question for Pete. What is your take on why 50-year-old or less listeners prefer Beatles songs from Rubber Soul on and not the first 5 albums?
Well, I can tell you what my perspective is on that. I just prefer, and maybe it's because of the music that I gravitate towards is a little bit more complex and a little bit more experimental. I personally find that the Rubber Soul era and onwards really saw the Beatles kind of grow up as a band.
Exactly.
They started experimenting, whereas the pre, and I hate to use the term because people always like slaughter me for it, but those early Beatles albums is filled with a lot of kind of like,
they're pop songs,
teenage pop songs. I mean, that's what they're appealing to. It's not a bad thing to say that you're making music like that. I mean, that's what that teenagers were listening to the Beatles and they loved them for it. And those are all great songs, but they're all songs about, boys and girls and relationships and all that kind of stuff. But then the Beatles grew up and that's when they put out all those masterful albums. It's not taking anything away from the early albums, but I think that, people just liked the fact that the Beatles grew up. Their music got a little bit more challenging to listen to. And quite frankly, there's a tremendous difference between that early part of the catalog and the later part of the catalog. It's like night and day.
Yeah.
Just musically, they were much better at their instruments. They were using all these different techniques in the studio. It's just night and day between the two. It really is.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think my Beatles favorite record is probably Revolver.
Revolver is fantastic. Yeah. That's a top 3 Beatles album of all time.
Yeah, She Said, man.
Great.
That's a great song. Colston Year, question to both of you. He says it's 1:30 a.m. in the UK. Wow. Well, thanks for being here, man. What are your go-to late night albums? That's a good question.
Late night albums. Well, in my earlier years, not so much anymore, but in my earlier years, Pink Floyd Metal. That was a big go-to album in my earlier years.
See, I'm at a point now where I'm all about variety. I don't really listen to albums. I listen to cuts, and Spotify for me is the best thing because I'll take. Like my tastes are pretty varied too. I was just talking about that earlier with someone, and I'll listen to everything and anything, and I really like a lot of yacht rock stuff. I love that early 70s disco. I love too. That's the kind of stuff that I'd want to be listening to. So just a mix of that kind of stuff, like Poco America, Little River Band,
Pablo Cruz.
Oh, all that stuff. I love that stuff, man.
And I'll tell you a band right now that probably more so than in my younger years, that definitely a band that I like listening to late at night, like kind of chill music. Anything by Steely Dan.
Steely Dan would be another
that's
one.
Like turn the lights down. That's like fantastic type stuff. I just love it.
That stuff. It's so well played. You're master musicians, and you just can just sit there and appreciate it, man. Yeah, I love that stuff. Metal Madness 66 question for Pete. When I subbed to your channel in October 19th, you had 13,000 subs. Now you are over 42. Why do you think you've exploded the last 8 months as far as subs?
I think it's because we're producing content that people want to see. And I think we have really built a nice community over there. And more than anything else, I think, that's all thanks to all you guys who watch every day. It's honest programming. I mean, I'm a fan like you guys. And I was telling Mr. Hack here before we went on the air, it's like I didn't start doing this to become a famous celebrity or anything like that. I'm just a fan who wanted to start up a community of people who are like me, who just like talking about great music and stuff that they love. And I think that comes across. And I think you guys appreciate the type of things that I do. I try to keep variety. We do like 5 or 6 different kind of show themes, and we've been very lucky that a lot of bands now recognize what we do on the channel. They send their people over our way, and it's just really picked up, and it's really grown. It's a true community. I love the way you guys interact with each other and treat each other respectfully and share ideas and thoughts on music and opinions. And I think everybody, you obviously get your people who don't abide by these type of things, but most people are very respectful towards each other. Most people understand that we all have opinions, and it's okay to differ in opinions on certain types of music or albums or bands or what have you. And I think that it's just really grown, and a strong community will continue to grow. And I think that's kind of what we're doing there.
Yeah, exactly. And Cole Shining is a new sub. Thank you so much. And I got to tell you, Pete, I've broken my record. I've never had over 100 people on a live stream.
How many we got now?
We're bouncing between 110 and 111, so that's
cool.
That's awesome. Okay, question for Pete. What do you think of the direction progressive rock took with artists like David Sylvian and Robert Fripp?
Well, it definitely went more experimental, right? And you got Brian Eno throw in there as well, and Roxy Music and all that kind of stuff. That was like a kind of veered down a different avenue away from the more symphonic stuff to kind of like more like electronic music and avant-garde music. So you have these little kind of different avenues that some bands were taking that moved away from like what Yes and Genesis and ELP were doing. So I like some of it. Some of it's just a little too out there for me, but I usually am pretty accepting of a lot of things. If you've been following my channel, you know that I'm into all sorts of weird stuff at times. So, but yeah, those artists were definitely going in a different direction than some of the more popular bands were.
Now, you would know this, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember seeing something on YouTube the other day. It was a very old clip. It was David Bowie on some European TV show, and he had Robert Fripp playing guitar for him.
Yep.
Is that correct? He was playing a Strat. And he was, oh my, the stuff he was doing, it was just like mind-blowing stuff that guy was playing, man. It's just, he's on a different plane. Like,
yeah, he is. He does stuff in all sorts of different tunings. And well, after he broke up King Crimson, he was, trying to kind of find his way there. And he guested on a couple of David Bowie albums and did some assorted TV show appearances and things with him. And he was, recording with a whole bunch of different people. So, he's an amazingly talented guy, very reserved and quiet guy. And he's another guy I would love to get on my show one of these days.
Robert,
I don't know how big of an interview guy he is. I don't know. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, he could be one of these quiet types.
Yeah.
Okay, hang on. Just I thought I had another question here. So, let's talk about AC/DC for a minute. So, apparently, I don't know, maybe you've got more knowledge on this, but apparently they already have recorded another record. They brought Brian Johnson back. That whole thing about I can't hear, and then they Axel, and then he's out, and I don't know. I think something happened there. I don't think it had anything to do with his ears, but who knows?
I mean, all I can tell you as someone in his mid-50s who occasionally has kind of hearing things going on, I don't think at this age and older ear problems go away. So I was a little skeptical there too, because it seemed like, he's got the issues going on with his ears. He may never be able to perform live again. And, the doctor said, no way you can be subjected to all that volume. And then a year and a half later, now all of a sudden he's fine again.
Yeah.
Something must have happened there. It had to have. It had to have.
Yeah.
And the whole situation was just really weird.
Some smells funky there. And I don't know, what's your, I mean, apparently, and the bass player came back. Cliff Williams is back, and he
said he was done, right?
And he said he was done. And I'm pretty sure he said he was done because of what was going down with Brian Johnson. I think the two are probably connected. So now they've recorded another record. I don't know when it's going to come out, but they're going back and mining the back catalog, because apparently Malcolm just stockpiled a bunch of riffs. Right, and they brought Phil Rudd back too. I don't know. What do you think of should AC/DC keep going? And I'm going to ask the same question about Kiss in a minute.
Well, this is my guess on all this. So obviously, there's not going to be any new record coming out in 2020. That's not going to happen. My guess is it's all about the money, first of all, because let's face it. Another tour, or even one more tour with those four guys. Actually, it's going to be five guys, because you got Stevie Young as well. Will make bang up bucks. Big. I mean, you're talking big stadiums all around the world, right? 50,000 plus a night or thereabouts. They're not going to do that now. Obviously, they can't do that now. They're going to wait until the climate is ready and willing and able to have that happen again. They're going to release that album, whatever it consists of. Like, I've heard the same thing you heard, that it's all these old riffs that Malcolm was working on that they've turned into songs. Hopefully, Brian's situation, he can still sing, right? Because when I saw them live a few years ago with him, he sounded great. So, Phil back in the band, they've had his issues with him. He's got personal issues of his own he's been trying to take care of, whatever. But that band, that lineup will do big business, because that's the lineup most people want to see.
That's what people want to see. Exactly.
It's all about the money, right? So it's so if 2021, if COVID dies down and they can do these tours and they can release that album, the album will sell big business, as much as album sales are these days, which is not what it used to be. But more importantly, they will go out and play those big football stadiums, make a killing, and maybe then it's time to say goodbye. I don't know. I mean, Angus doesn't appear like he wants to pack it in anytime soon. That's the problem.
Yeah, I don't think that guy ever wants to retire. I think he's gonna. Yeah. So let me ask you this quick question, and then I'll get back to the rock, the older rock bands again. Metal Hippie's asking if you're a fan of Ministry.
Not really. I am not a huge fan of kind of those industrial type bands. They're okay for what they do. It's not really my cup of tea.
So, I mean, you've got there was going to be a tour this year with it was Motley Crue, it was Def Leppard, it was all these bands. Let me ask you this honestly, of the older bands that are out there now, how many of them do you think should still be doing it? And how many have you seen that you're like, man, these guys should have just hung it up?
Well, I mean, there's some that are
put
still
you on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. And there are some that are going out there, they're still killing it. Like, I mean, in the last year and a half, I saw Judas Priest 3 times. And I know a lot of people are like, well, it's, hardly any classic members in the band anymore. But, you got Halford, you got Ian Hill, you got Scott on the drums, Tipton, they kind of wheel out there every now and then if he can make it. He's not doing well, so whatever. But, man, they still sound great. Iron Maiden still sounds great on stage. I mean, I saw Uriah Heep opening up for Priest, and they were fantastic. Saxon is still killing it out there, live and on record. There's actual, and I know a lot of people give me a lot of crap for this, but Whitesnake, even though Coverdale is a shell of his former self vocally, he still is a great frontman, and his band kills live on stage. So they still put on a great show. Deep Purple still puts on a great show. The problem is with a lot of these bands is that the singers can't keep up their their level at these advanced ages. I mean, the rest of these guitar players still play phenomenally. Most of the drummers are still good. I mean, the bands themselves are still very, very good and very tight. Most of the problems are with the singers. I mean, you mentioned Def Leppard before. I mean, Joe Elliott doesn't sing as good as he used to either.
No.
Unfortunately, Def Leppard hasn't really recorded any new music that's grabbed the general public in a long, long time. So they're out there playing all the hits. I mean, I don't even think I should say anything about Motley Crue because I have often talked about how much I despise that band. So it's probably better I just don't even go there.
You're not a Crue fan?
I am not a Crue fan at all. No. So
got a lot of them in the chat. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, well, and that's fine. I mean, everybody loves what they love. Right?
Exactly. That's fine.
I used to be a Crue fan way back in the early '80s, but nope, sorry. So I saw yesterday. For all you Dokken fans out there, I saw a video of a live Dokken show from, I guess it was last weekend. And they got Reb Beach on guitar now from Winger and Whitesnake. And Don sounded just absolutely awful. I mean, I couldn't believe how bad he sounded. I mean, I know he's had lots of physical issues and whatnot, but he sounded like he was like half asleep, like sleepwalking out there. And I mean, it was just like, it's embarrassing to watch. I'm like, and you've seen like videos of like Rat and Motley Crue. It's just like, and even Kiss. And it's like, oof, man, what is going on there? It's like, or David Lee Roth. Remember those David Lee Roth videos from a few months back? It's like, jeez.
So let me mention Judas Priest. Judas Priest was one of my favorite bands. It's probably my favorite. There's that debate, in the '80s, favorite heavy metal band, Priest, Iron Maiden. For me, it's Priest by a landslide. But anyways, Rob Halford, like you've seen him. I've seen them not 3 times, but I've seen them twice in probably the last 5 years. The first time, and here's the other thing that kills me about Priest. Their last 2 records, most of these bands that come out with new records, I'm sorry, but they're crap. But the last 2 Priest records, holy shit, are they good.
Yeah.
Redeemer of Souls is amazing.
Yep.
Firepower, they're both great records. Now, the first time I saw Priest of the 2 shows, Glenn Tipton was still there. So, and I have no problem with Richie Faulkner. I have no problem with him.
He's a great player.
He's amazing. And as far as the drummer, he's the best drummer they ever had. So I got no problem with the drummer. And Rob Halford, I'm telling you, this is going to be, I'll tell this story. I'm there with my buddy who also grew up with Priest. And when Rob Halford was doing Bloodstone. And when he hit that note, you had 2 grown men crying because he hit that note. Like, that's how much it meant to us, right? Like, you can still do it, man.
Yeah.
But then the next time I went to see them, that's when Glenn Tipton was ill, and they brought out another guy. And I'd watched that show, and I'm sorry. I couldn't. That's it. I'm done.
Really?
I can't do it without Glenn. Glenn's got to be there for me.
I've seen him 3 times since Glenn was diagnosed, and one of the 3 shows he came out and played the last couple tunes, whatever. But I think Andy Sneap does a fine job as a fill-in, but it's mostly the Richie Faulkner show now. He's like playing most of the solos, and I don't know.
Which he should.
He's really good. He's really good. He's probably a better guitar player than either KK or Glenn. I know people are going to be like, no way, but he's really good.
I'll give you KK, but I won't, not Glenn.
Glenn in his prime was a fantastic player. Yeah,
I think Glenn was always the better player in that band.
Yeah. Well, KK had a little more flair. He had the look, but Glenn was a better technician. Yeah.
I agree totally. And oh man, for bands that need to pack it in, and should have packed it in a good 10, 15 years ago. I mean, as much like we talked off air, and I'm a huge Kiss fan. Kiss should have packed it in 10, 15 years ago. I mean, it's embarrassing, right? It's gotten to that point. I saw them about 3 or 4 years ago. I saw them again last year on this current. But anyways, 3 or 4 years ago, I went to see them in a casino here. and Paul Stanley was addressing the crowd. He hadn't even sung a note, and already his voice was just cracking, like a 13-year-old kid in puberty. Right? It was. I was with my wife, and she's like, "Oh my God, we got to listen to this guy sing the whole night." It was horrible. It was horrible. Like, and Rat Stephen Piercy. Oh, pack it in, guys.
Yeah,
pack it in.
He's a joke. Yeah.
Pack it in. There's a few, like you mentioned. Ian Gillan. I don't have no idea if Ian Gillan can. I'm not a big Deep Purple guy. Can he still sing? Is he still all right?
Well, I'll put it to you this way: he sings what he's capable of. So
Okay.
in the old days, Ian was all about screams and all that kind of stuff. He can't do any of that anymore. So he sings like a 72 or 3-year-old guy, and he can sing the songs. He sings them differently, right? They sings them in a different key and all that kind of stuff. But he doesn't embarrass himself at all. That's the thing. I mean, he looks like everybody's grandpa up there, and he's having a great time. And Ian is just such a kind of funny, kind of quirky dude anyway, right? So he's up there telling stories in between songs, and it's perfectly fine. I don't have an issue with Ian Gillan's voice. He obviously doesn't sing like he did 30, 40 years ago, but it's okay with him.
There's a few guys like that are like Rob Halford is a freak of nature. Glenn Hughes is a freak of nature.
Glenn Hughes has found the fountain of youth.
Oh my God.
I mean, that guy sounds better than he did, and here's a guy, if you know anything about the history of Glenn Hughes, here's a guy who probably should be dead.
Yeah. In the 80s.
I mean, he went through a whole decade plus of severe addiction to cocaine and crack that the fact that he's still alive is incredible. And his voice sounds like perfectly preserved. I mean, he's singing as good as he did now, as good now as he did, 20, 30 years ago. And he puts guys half his age to shame. That's how good he is.
And somebody was mentioning in the chat of those that can still do it. Steven Tyler can still.
Yeah, I haven't seen Aerosmith live in a million years, but I've heard
neither have I.
Pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, apparently that a friend of mine that's in the chat saw them at the Las Vegas residency. And he said he sounded fantastic. Yeah, not like their appearance on the Grammys. That was embarrassing. That's so bad. It's like, what song are you playing? I'm playing this. What are you playing? It's like the three things going on at the same time. Yeah, and I was gonna bring up Motley Crue, but I know you're not a fan. But there's a band. Vince Neil. I mean, he's just forget about it. Yeah. So hang on a second here. There was a question or comment. Percy never could sing. He just wrote a lot of the tunes and had the look.
I would agree with that. For me, that band was all about their guitar players. Just me.
Yeah.
He did have a unique voice. I will give him that. I mean, nobody didn't sound like anybody else. He had that weird kind of thing going on, but I don't know. Didn't really do a lot for me.
You know what's cool is guys like Robert Plant, right? Who just keeps morphing, That's
what you got to do when you get that age, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like Robert, I mean, when he was younger, of course, he had the power and the scream and all that stuff, but he always had a very nice sounding voice, you know what I mean? He didn't have to do that, and he's a guy, I mean, look at the stuff that he's doing now. It's all very mellow, something like folky, country flavored almost, and he's singing with people who can really sing well, and the guy holds his own, and I totally get it. I mean, there was all that. Well, this is going back when they did the Celebration Day and all that. Oh, Zeppelin go out, Zeppelin go out, Zeppelin go out. He's like, I did that already.
And he can't sing that stuff anymore in the way he used to. And I think he realizes, like, why bother, right?
And if you watch Celebration Day, he's already not singing it like that. He's already bringing it down a bit. And I don't know what they were tuned down to. Must have been like, I don't know, maybe they brought it down to D or something. I don't know. They must have really tuned down for that show. Yeah. So let's talk about guitars here for a minute. I see you got a Les Paul behind you. So are you a guitar player as well? I'm assuming you are. You have one there.
Yep. So I dabble in. I have 3 Les Pauls actually. I have that's my traditional gold top.
That's nice.
I have a Tobacco Burst Classic in the back, and then I've got Cherry Sunburst Standard there as well.
Oh, is that a Telecaster I see there?
That is, yep.
That's the guitar that I'm actually jonesing for right now. Is a Telecaster.
Awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tellies are nice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an American. Really good.
Is that like the American Standard?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh no, sorry, the American Professional. Sorry.
Oh, so it's a newer one.
Yeah, it's a 2019.
Yeah, those are really nice. Those pickups in that thing are fantastic.
Yeah, the necks are amazing. Amazing neck on that.
Yeah, yeah. So, like, are you do it for a hobby or do you gig or?
Nah, it's always been a hobby. I'm just kind of like a play-at-home guy, and I love to dabble in riffs and stuff like that. I'm a total hack. I'm a total hack. I just play for the love of it. I don't record anything. I haven't been in a band in like a million years. I just play for the love of it when I have the time, and just sitting, jam in my office here and come up with stuff and copy riffs and do all sorts of fun things. And more than anything, I'm also a collector too. So.
Oh, cool. Well, on the back of my T-shirt, as this is like my logo for one of the logos for the channel. On the back it says, "I'm a hack and I'm okay."
It's okay to be a hack, right? I mean,
it's okay. We're all hacks. Metalhead Hippie's got a question. What are some of Pete's favorite indie bands or artists? Folk and blues.
Folk and blues. I'm not much of a folk fan. All right, I don't dislike it, but it's not really my cup of tea. As far as like blues guys, I mean, I love like Walter Trout and Eric Gales. I know this is not quite indie stuff, but
Eric Gales is awesome.
Eric Gales is amazing. I like the early Kenny Wade and Shepherd stuff. I like a guy. You ever hear of a guy named Philip Sacey? He is absolutely incredible. Oh,
Strat player. He's a monster.
He is absolutely a monster. He's probably one of my favorites.
Plays with fire, that guy, man.
Oh, he is so good. He's probably my favorite of the more underground guys. I'm a big Bonamassa fan as well. I just love him.
I was just going to ask you that because here's the thing with Bonamassa. He is such a polarizing guy, right? It's people love him or people hate him. Oh, he sounds mechanical. He doesn't have any soul, this and that. I'm like, are you for real?
He's got a lot of soul.
I mean, come on, man.
I have found that most people who diss on Bonamassa diss on him because he's out there so much and because he owns so much gear. It's like he's the hardest working guy in show business.
Yep.
He's made his money due to busting his ass since he was like 10 years old. So shit, if I had as much, money as him and worked as hard as him and I had extra money to spend, I'd buy gear too. What's wrong with that? And but if you've watched, because he's doing a YouTube show now where he's interviewing, like he had Warren Haynes on the other day. He's got Paul Stanley on recently, right? Yep. It's a great shows. I mean, he's just such a real humble guy, and he's from like, my part of New York, but a little further north, obviously. And he's just, and I've seen him live so many times, and he's great. He puts on a great show. So I don't get the hate. I really don't get the hate. And there's a lot of people like, oh, everything he plays is unoriginal, and he sounds like this guy. He sounds like this guy. It's because he loves those guys. I mean, he pays homage to all of his heroes all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. He's not the only guy doing that. I hate to tell you, but he's just he's on his level of popularity is more than the other guys who are doing the exact same thing. But there's so many like blues and rock players who that's all they do also, but nobody craps on them all the time. So
yeah, well, and I mean, you're talking about he puts on a good show. Look at the band he takes out with him.
Incredible.
He's got Anton Fig on the drums, man. Like, come on. He's playing with world-class musicians.
He is.
Reese
Winans from Steve Ray Vaughan's band.
Reese Winans, exactly. Yeah, I mean, the guy's bringing the best musicians playing the, that style of music. Like, how could you not enjoy that and respect it? Like, I don't know. I don't get it.
Yeah,
Hugh Caldwell's got a question. This is going to be tough for you, Pete. With looking at all the records behind you. Your 3 Desert Island albums.
3 Desert Island albums. Deep Purple and Rock. Black Sabbath Volume 4. Led Zeppelin Physical Graffiti.
Well, that didn't take long.
No.
There you go. But see, again, you went back to your beginnings, right?
Yep.
that we always go back.
The old standbys, right? And if quite honestly, the more I would think about something like that, because sometimes when you get asked questions like that, my tendency is not to overthink it, because now that I'm overthinking it, I'm going to go back and I'll say, well, you know what? Maybe I should take Deep Purple Made in Japan, because then I can have some of those tracks from In Rock and Machine Head and Fireball. And that's I love live albums to death. So maybe I would take Made in Japan. I think I still would take Physical Graffiti, and maybe I take Kiss Alive, which is my favorite Kiss album, even though it's a live album. But I love live, because for me, those 70s live albums are like kick-ass greatest hit sets all their own. It's like you take one of those and you got the best of any band's catalog, and the live performances are amazing. So, but I think those 3 studio albums I picked would those are at the top of my list.
Well, the whole thing with and again, I'm not going to dwell on Kiss, but the whole thing about the live album is like you had such shitty production on the first 3. It's like now you're hearing them. Now you're really hearing the songs with some kind of kick is on the live versions, right?
Yeah, those are the ultimate versions right there.
Yeah. Matt Crosina is asking Kiss or AC/DC. Well, it's Kiss for me.
It's Kiss for me too.
There you go.
And I love AC/DC, don't get me wrong, but I think if we were to look at like the entire catalogs of both bands, I think that the AC/DC catalog as a whole is stronger. But for me, I'll take those Kiss 70s albums over anything from AC/DC.
Yeah. See, the thing with AC/DC's got Back in Black. That's an absolute masterpiece, top to bottom. For Those About to Rock is still pretty good, already a little bit weaker. And in those records they were putting out in the 80s, they'd have like maybe 2 good cuts, 3 good cuts, and then, do you know what I mean? But that can be said for Kiss too, right? Look at Kiss's 80s. Now when you start to think about it and analyze it, yeah. But like you say, those 70s Kiss records are absolutely stellar, man. Absolutely stellar.
They are.
Here's a good question. This is from Keith. Oh, by the way, we're already over the hour. Are you still all right?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, Keith O'Day's asking you to pick 3 albums that are completely underrated.
Completely underrated. Rush, Caress of Steel, Captain Beyond debut, Cactus, One Way or Another. There you go.
Oh, I love Cactus.
Yeah.
I love Cactus.
Not enough people know about Cactus.
Yeah. I know. And I thought when you said Rush, I thought you were going to say Hemispheres.
Nah, because I think most folks just love that album off the bat. I think for me, Caress of Steel is the album that just gets ignored by everybody. That's an absolutely tremendous album.
Yeah. This is the 40th anniversary of the Back in Black record. That's true.
Yep.
Yeah. So, folks, if you've got any questions for Pete, please tag me in the chat so I can see it right away. Put @GuitarHack. And again, if you're new to the channel, please hit the like and subscribe button. Much appreciated. Cactus is out of Detroit. I had no idea they were a Detroit band. Yeah. Who is it? Like, I don't know anything about Cactus, the band itself. I know that somebody turned me onto their music, and it just blew me away because it's that. I hear a ton of Hendrix in Cactus. A ton of Hendrix influence in Cactus.
Yeah, there's a little bit. I mean, it's I think Cactus took like the influence from bands like the Experience, as well as like the Jeff Beck group and early Led Zeppelin. This kind of really good bluesy boogie hard rock type of thing. And you got Carmine Appice on drums, who's a legend, obviously.
Okay,
and,
that was who else was famous in that band?
Tim Bogart and Carmine Appice. They both came from the Vanilla Fudge.
Okay, and then they got together with Beck after that. Was that after Cactus? Or
that was after Cactus. Yeah. So
okay, all right.
Yeah, and Jim McCarty, who was the lead guitar player for Cactus, he was the guy. He's actually their Detroit connection. He came from the Detroit Wheels, Mitch Ryder and company.
Okay, that's a band I've not. Everybody mentions that band. I have not heard one song of Mitch Ryder.
Their first album is great.
Oh, there
really
you go.
Good. Yeah, really
There's
good.
another one to check out. For keep mining, keep going back to that mine. Those early '70s, late '60s records.
Great stuff.
Metal Madness 66 has got a question. What's your biggest fanboy moment?
My biggest fanboy moment ever? Oh, wow. All right. Probably, and I'm going to say this was probably 2002 or 3. I was at a progressive rock festival in Pennsylvania called Nearfest, and it was like a weekend long thing, and all these great prog bands were playing there and whatnot. And I go down to breakfast. We're in the hotel, and there sitting at a table having breakfast by himself was Steve Hackett, the former guitar legend from Genesis. And I was like, all right, do I go up and introduce myself and tell him who I am and what I do, and, potentially make an ass of myself? And I was like, yep, I'm going to do that. So I walked up, told him I'm sorry, I was, hope I'm not interrupting your breakfast, but I did want to come and say hello to you and tell you how much of a fan I am. And so looking forward to seeing you play this weekend. And here's what I do, blah, blah, blah. Would love to talk to you sometime. And he was very courteous and very nice. And lo and behold, like not even a year later, I actually got set up with it to interview him. And would you believe it or not, he remembered our conversation at the breakfast table. And I never, I thought, this is like a famous guy, rock star, probably meets a million people. And he remembered. And I interviewed him. He came on my YouTube channel a month ago or so, and he remembered both of those times. And it's just, you would never think that. So for me, I just felt like a, giddy school kid, one of my guitar heroes, man, remembers me from 20 years ago. How cool is that? So,
that's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. Okay. I don't know if you can, this is a pretty heavy question. I don't know if you can answer this, but who do you think has been the single biggest influence on rock music to date? That's crazy.
The single biggest?
Yeah, I don't know.
One musician?
Well, the single biggest influence, I'm thinking he's asking for a musician.
My gut tells me Jimi.
Which Jimi?
Hendrix. But I don't know single biggest, because you know what? That's a guitarist, although a vocalist too. But McCartney, from a songwriting perspective, right? Can't really argue that one too much.
I think it's too broad a question. You know what I mean? Because in terms of like the band writing their own songs, that was brand new when the Beatles did it, right? Yeah. So is that, it's in terms of like taking the guitar to the next level, then the Jimi Hendrixes would come into play. Like it's a pretty broad question. Has Pete heard of the band Tractor? It's a UK band. This is from Hugh Caldwell.
No.
Not
familiar with them.
Okay, Middlehead Hippie is saying pick one: America, Bread, or Mamas and the Papas.
I like America the best. America's a pretty terrific band. It's amazing how many great songs they had.
Yeah. Dawn Chaldine.
What's up, Dawn? How are you?
Is asking, does Pete like to learn songs by bands he admires, or does he prefer to improvise his own compositions?
A little of both, but I'm the kind of guy where it's like, if I hear like a really cool riff or something, cool passage by a known band or whatever, I'm kind of like, that would be pretty cool to learn and jam to, right? So then I'll sit down and that'll be I'll say I'm the kind of guy that's me in a nutshell. It's like, I'll go and I'll hear these cool riffs and things, and I'll try to recreate them as close as possible, whether just by ear or whether you go on YouTube and find other guys who have figured it out and all this kind of crap. And then I'll learn them, I'll play them for a bit, and then I move on to the next one. And I may never play that other one again. But a lot of times I'm just creating my own stuff. I would say probably 60, 70% of the time I'm just kind of playing my own shit. But the rest of the time I'm trying to go figure stuff out. That's probably me.
I do this other show on another channel called The Live Wires, and we do a thing called Riff of the Week. And sometimes it'll be people requesting, how do you play this riff or that riff? And other times, like when there isn't a request, I'll be like listening to something like, holy shit, that's a really cool riff, and do exactly what you said and just try to figure it out. Yeah. Okay, what was your opinion, on the Proclamation fan video? Do you know about it?
Yeah, the Gentle Giant thing. I thought it was terrific. So for those of you who are wondering what that is, so I had Derek Shulman, one of the founding members and lead singer from Gentle Giant, an old British prog band from the 70s. He was on my show about 2 months ago or so. And so this band broke up in 1980 and never, ever reformed. Okay. Very rare nowadays. Usually when bands say they're retired, they're done, they break up, they always get back together. There's always a reunion, right? Well, these guys never did. And the fans have been crying for it for decades, right? So I had him on the show and I asked him, I said, so I got to ask the question, has there ever been any discussion since last he and I spoke, which was like 15 years ago, about doing something together again, blah, blah, blah. And he says, well, now that you ask, so what they did was they picked one song from their catalog, which is Proclamation. And it was originally a fan thing. So like all these fans who are musicians would go and record their parts to the song, which is a really complex, prog rock classic, like a 6-minute long track. And so they had, people on all sorts of instruments and stuff recording the songs on their own instrument. And they took that and edited it together with little bits from the surviving members of the band doing vocals and guitars and things like that. And it must have taken them months to edit this thing together. So here you have this video with all of the surviving members and a lot of their fans playing this classic song, everybody kind of like helping create it and put it together. So it's the first time that those guys from that band actually appear on anything together, musically since 1980. Cool. And it was really, really well done, really cool. It's cool to see like all the fans and some of these people, these fans are like really young, like half my age, young, really cool.
Yeah, you wonder how they got into that. I mean, like that's a band that I've never heard anything from. So I mean,
they're really good. Yeah, they're really good.
How did they discover these guys? Does Pete like the band Sword? The Sword.
Yes. Very good band. I will say their last album, kind of on the fence about that one, but their early stuff is just kick-ass. Really good stoner band. Just great, kind of Black Sabbath riffing and good grooves and really, really cool band.
Okay, here's a question that came up actually on my channel. This is remember I was talking about the Riff of the Week thing? So I did a Riff of the Week, the song by Def Leppard, Let It Go, off the High and Dry record. And we were talking a little bit about that record. So Jerry's saying, question for Pete, what do you think of the Def Leppard High and Dry album?
Love it. It's their best album. No question. Yeah, and I think that album, the production's great on the album. I think that's a good Mutt Lange production before it got a little too. I mean,
exactly.
The follow-up album is great too, but then it just started to it's just too big. I mean, and in essence, they were just a guitar band, and I think they kind of got away from that a little bit. But man, that album is just chock full of one great riff after another. Absolute classic. Yeah.
When you got to take 6 hours to record 3 notes, it's like okay.
Yeah.
It's like it just saps the life out of. I don't know. It just saps the life out of it. It loses something. And unfortunately, those are the songs, when you go see them, that's what you're going to hear them play. Yeah. You're not going to hear anything off of High and Dry. You're going to hear Pyromania and Hysteria.
Well, they're playing what sold them. What people, the general public loves those big, overly produced 80s hits. That's the way it is, especially here in this country.
Yeah. Well, it might have been actually, it was your show. And you guys were talking about Iron Maiden and how the song list, the set list that they play here is different than what they play in Europe. Yep. Where Europe, they'll play some deep cuts, and here they're just playing the hits. So that's which to me, that would be like, well, they're playing for their fans. Here they're playing for the casual listener. That's how I interpret that.
That's what it is. I mean, I will tell you, and I know plenty of them, people here who claim to be huge Maiden fans all they want to hear from them every tour is the same like 15 songs over and over and over again. I'm like, you know what? Pull out your copy of Live After Death and just listen to that. Why go see? I mean, it's just I don't understand. You know, like Maiden, what they would rather do is come out and play the majority of their new album when they release a new album, play the majority of the new album and a handful of hits. But the audiences here, like, just they detest that. They're like, oh, I got to sit through this whole album. Like, that's what you do. I mean, man, if this was the 70s or the 80s, that's what bands did. They went on tour to sell a record, right? So they would play a good chunk of the record mixed with some of their popular stuff. Man, you can't get away with that now here in the US. It's like people, they only want to hear the hits. That's it. They just want to hear the stuff that I grew up on. And I get it. And, you know, you should want to hear most of that stuff, but people just, they want to go on a bathroom break whenever, or go to the bar whenever like a newer track is played. Yeah. It's just beyond frustrating.
Well, funny enough, the couple times that I saw Priest, I mean, they were promoting, the first time was Redeemer of Souls, and the second time was, and they were playing stuff off of those records, and they were playing some deep stuff. Not a lot, one or two songs. I mean, they have to play, you know, the songs everybody knows, but they were actually, surprisingly, they played some new material and they played some of the deeper cuts, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, on the Firepower tour, they did a great job of that. They did like the mandatory stuff, which they had to play. Right. They played like 4 tracks off the new album, I think, right. And like a couple they dug out. Like you know, every show that I saw, they played like 3 tracks that they hadn't played in a long time.
Yes, yeah,
which is great.
Yeah, yeah.
Like they did Saints in Hell one show that I saw, which was amazing because they never played that any other time I saw them all throughout the 80s.
Yeah, exactly. Juan Diaz is asking, what is the best jazz rock band ever and one currently going on? Jazz rock.
Probably my favorite, and then there's 2 of them for me that I often struggle with on which one I prefer, but I'm going to give the nod today to Return to Forever. I love them. As far as like a newer one, geez, there's a lot of good new ones. What's some of the more recent ones? There's a band I'm thinking of. They're a U.S. band. They're from New York, and their name is escaping me right now. Skinny Puppy.
Oh, okay. All right, here's an interesting question. Who do you think is the best shredder?
Best shredder?
Van Halen. Okay, but he's taken out Eddie and he's taken out Yngwie.
You know what? He's way more musical than that, but he can shred up a storm, and he might be the most talented guitar player in many years. Steve Vai. That guy can blaze, but he's a lot more than just a shredder. I mean, if we're talking about just simply shredders, Chris Impellitteri is like a ridiculous shredder. That guy can shred balls, man. Jeff Young, you still watching? You're a pretty good shredder yourself. But yeah, I don't know. For me, Vai is just just from another planet. He's so good, and he can play so fast and just do all the wacky stuff. And
so are you like? Because I've talked about this before on my channel. Vai or Satriani? You're a Vai guy.
I'm a Vai guy.
Yeah, I'm a Satriani guy. Actually, and you would talk about musical, and Half-Ace nailed it. Nuno Betancourt, my God.
Oh yeah, he's great, and there's a lot of guys who like Richie Kotzen is an incredible shredder too.
Yeah,
you wouldn't tell by a lot of his music that he does now, but man, if you go listen to some of his earlier stuff, I mean, that guy absolutely blazes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, when it comes to Vai and Satriani, and a lot of people compare those 2 guys, and I think that you are absolutely correct. Satch is a lot more musical. Mm-hmm. They're both talent-wise pretty much on par with each other, but I have always liked the risk-taking that Vai does, and I think that Vai just has this overall palette of stuff in his arsenal that I think surpasses Satch a little bit. But Satch is the guy who writes the memorable songs and plays very tasty. You know, they're different players, obviously. But I just personally, and I love them both, but I give the edge to Vai, but that's just me.
Yeah, yeah. Metalhead Hippie's asking if you're a fan of Jen Majura.
Who is that?
Jen Majura. Who does she plays with? Oh God, who does she play with? Remind me who she plays with, Metalhead Hippie. I'm having a brain fart. Is it? Oh, not Evanescence. She's playing.
Not familiar
with Evanescence. Yeah. Well,
yeah, I'm not much on Evanescence. I've listened to very little of their music.
Yeah. Dogpa mentions Tom Quayle. Yeah, he's a monster too. And somebody just Zach Thong mentions Jason Becker back in the
Oh day. Yeah, and Friedman's great too.
Marty Friedman, yeah. All right. So I'm gonna put you on the spot here again. Of the 70s classic bands, well, I think you already mentioned that. You said Black Sabbath. Or let's take Sabbath out of it. Of the 70s classic bands, who is... Okay, take Deep Purple out of it. Any ones that you've already mentioned. But other than those, like if you were to... Who would be like your favorite 70s classic rock band?
Like classic rock?
Yeah.
I'd have to give a nod to... I'm going to throw two out if that's okay. Thin Lizzy and UFO. Because I think both of those bands, highly influential, both of them deserve to be a lot bigger than they were, especially here in this country. And I think there's so many great albums and some great, we're talking guitar stuff here, right? So, you had great guitar players in Thin Lizzy. You had Michael Schenker and Paul Chapman in UFO. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. And like I said, I think both of those bands are great because they're not really metal bands. That's good 70s hard rock. It's just good hard rock. It's just and so many like casual rock fans like, oh yeah, the boys are back in town. They don't know anything else, right? And they're missing all this kick-ass stuff. And UFO, they're like, oh, you mentioned Dr. Doctor. Oh, I think I heard that song, but they don't know anything else by it. And I think there's just so much great music from both of those acts that like anybody who's just into good quality 70s rock music would totally love. And I preach those two bands to anybody and everybody all the time because I think like I said, neither band really got their due. Obviously people who know about rock music know those bands and respect them and love them, but not enough people.
Yeah, Michael Schenker is
one of my favorites of all time.
Yeah, see, I mean, getting back to guitar players, the guys that I like are the guys that are not playing 100 miles a minute. I like the guys that are actually saying something with what they play, So I'm, guys like Jimmy Page. And I hate to say it, I'm going to piss people up, but Ace Frehley back in the 70s. Every solo said something.
Yeah, that's it.
And if we get into the 80s, Elliot Easton from the Cars. Like, these are the guys that I really like because they're super musical, right? Whether they're, technically proficient or not, what they played in that span of time took whatever that song was and brought it to the next level. Michael Schenker would be another one, Those are the guys that I dig, right? Once it got into, like, acrobatics, like, I was out, But then, getting back to Nuno was one of those guys that had the acrobatics, but he didn't use that. That was not his mainstay. The guy played very musical phrase. I mean, listen to the solo on "Get the Funk Out," for example. Like,
that's good.
Holy shit, it's perfect, right? Those are the guys that I dig. Those are like my favorite guitar players. Are those, And then if we get sort of more into the, like you mentioned, Steely Dan, like. Get into guys like Larry Carlton, and get into more
Carlton's
like
great. Yeah,
like
Scott Baxter and all. Oh yeah,
these tasty guys, man. They just like Bonamassa, Blues Deluxe. If you have not listened to that, listen to that. That is like insane. That's like the best freaking blues playing in the planet. Like that. Those are the guys that I really, really dig. Really, really.
Yeah, I went through my my shredder period, like in the 80s, where just like everybody else did, I started listening to Yngwie, and I still like Yngwie quite a bit, but Yngwie and Tony McAlpine and Vinnie Moore, and all these guys who came out of like the shrapnel stuff and the Becker and Friedman, but I kind of lost interest in that in the early 90s, and I started going back to the guys who really like made a statement to me early on, and I went back to, Richie Blackmore's my man, right? Richie Blackmore and Shaker and Tony Iommi and Hendrix.
Oh, Iommi, yeah.
Robin Trower and Uli Roth and Frank Marino and Johnny Winter and all these kind of guys. It's just like those Gary Moore. Gary Moore is one of my favorites of all time. Another guy.
Gary Moore. There's another one. Yeah.
Oh, and it's like, and those are the guys who really speak to me, because they could do the fast stuff if they want to, but it's not what they're all about. It's more about the songs and feel. And Steve Morris, another guy, Al Di Meola. I mean, there's just so many.
Morris, yeah. Here's a question from the Pumpkin King. He's asking for the most overrated bands.
Most overrated bands. Well, we already talked about one of them, Motley Crue. No, actually, you want to know again, people are going to hate me for saying this, but I truly believe, I'll throw two of them out there. Nirvana and Guns N' Roses, for me, are two of the most overrated bands of all time. And I will give Guns N' Roses props for that debut. Yeah. Important album, legendary album. But I just don't think they have anything else other than that. It's like they have been like kind of like working the success of that debut album their entire career. And I think Axl Rose is a complete jerk. I have a lot of respect for Slash. Tasty player. Yeah. Very good player.
Slash is a tasty player.
He is. But man, other than that first album, which I never need to hear again, I just don't think they have anything else. I mean, those Use Your Illusion albums are not very good. There's a couple good songs there, but and it's like they've been working off that debut. That's their career right there, and they've made a lot of money off of it. And I know people idolize them everywhere, but I've just never been a fan really. And I think Nirvana, I just never got that. Never got it.
Never got Nirvana. I dig Nirvana. I do. For me, Alice in Chains would be one of them. They've never done anything for me.
See, I love Alice in Chains. When you go back to the Seattle scene, the only two bands that I can still listen to is Alice in Chains and Soundgarden. I like both of them.
But to me, they were. I dig.
Yeah, but both of them were just an extension of like the '70s heavy bands. I mean, to me, it's like, they were kind of just revamping the Black Sabbath sound in a different decade, kind of.
Yeah, like I mean, there's a couple of tunes that, like I love "Man in the Box." I think it's a great song, but I don't know. There's just not a hell of a lot there. Favorite rap artist?
I'll pass on that one.
Yeah, wrong channel.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah. Well, we're getting into the into 9:30 here, so we're gonna wrap this up soon. So if you guys have any last minute questions for Pete, pop them in the chat at Guitar Hack, and I'll see them right away. In the meantime, folks, again, if you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe. That would be much appreciated. If you're unaware of Pete's channel, most of you probably already know. That's why you're here. But for those that don't know about Pete's channel, Sea of Tranquility, I have the link below in the description. Also, if you'd like to support the Guitar Hack channel, I have merch. I've got t-shirts. I've got mugs. I've got stuff, hoodies. I'm the worst salesman. But it's there. The link is there below for the Guitar Hack store, or if you would prefer, I also have a PayPal down there as well. That would be much appreciated. I also have a Guitar Hack Facebook page and a Guitar Hack Instagram. The links for those are below. And there's a Guitar Hack group as well if you'd like to check that out. And my email is down there as well. So
cool.
All right. Just waiting to see if we got one last question here. If I don't see one, I've got one for you. Oh, I guess this is an inside joke for your channel. Why does Pete dislike the Ramones?
Yeah.
Is that an inside joke?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I am not much of a punk fan. I don't dislike the Ramones. Punk is just not really my thing.
Come on, you must have liked the Sex Pistols, never mind the Bullocks. No? Oh my God, that's one of my favorite albums.
I've never been much of a punk guy. I can listen to a little bit of the Stooges, the early stuff, and I like a couple Clash tunes. That's about it. I'm just not much of a punk guy.
Okay, so we're going to leave with this one. You got one last question. This is from Gary, Big G. What is Pete's favorite new album?
New album? Brand New Kansas. The Absence of Presence. It's awesome.
There you go.
Brand new, hot off the presses. And coming up in 2 weeks, the brand new Deep Purple album. Check it out. It's called Whoosh. WHOOSH. That's coming up August 7th.
You were that's the record you were discussing with Steve, so that's pretty cool. Okay, folks, I want to thank you all so much for checking out the show. We do this every week at 8 o'clock. I'm Pete. Would you like to do this again sometime?
Sure. Let me know. This was fun.
All right, perfect, man. Okay, so hang on for a minute, Pete. I'm just going to say goodbye to everybody. Hopefully we'll see you all next week on the Hack Show every Thursday, 8 o'clock. You guys rock. Thanks so much for being here. Cheers.